with Poruma, which created quite a stir. And at the center of all of it was a woman character. So over to you, Aparna.
Good evening, everyone. I believe this is called Crossing the Line. I'm not really aware that I've crossed any line. I'm pretty scared of crossing lines, actually. But I suppose it can be, hi Nandana, hi, hello, Happy New Year. But I suppose it can, in a sense, be called crossing the line because, first of all, in 1981, I made a film in English. When I'd written it, actually, most of my friends said, well, this is a nice intellectual exercise. Now, please put it away in a drawer because there's nobody who's going to touch this film. And that's what I suspected for a while, that nobody would touch it. You know, because when I took it to someone, somebody that actually, there was an actor called Jalal Agha who introduced me to someone, and this person was in charge of the blocked funds of Fox, 20th Century Fox. So I met him at a club, and I told him the story, and he said, well, ma'am, what are you trying to sell? Sex, violence, what? Let me confess that I got really scared. I said, no, it's just a very simple little story. It's just a very simple little story about an old woman. It's okay. You don't have to make it. And I went off. Then Shotuji Rai very kindly read the story, the script, and he said, just take it to Shashi Kapoor. He just said it like that. He said, I have a gut feeling Shashi will do it. And that's how it all started. But a lot of people had said, don't make this film in English. You know, I didn't know what other language to make it in. I wasn't aware that I was crossing a line. I was not trying to, make a crossover film or anything like that. It just came naturally in English because the character was Anglo-Indian. So there was no other way that she could speak except in English. So I had a kissing scene in it. Nobody at that time had kissing scenes in the sense of lip lock, which we have all the time nowadays. And even Ray, when he read the script, he said, well, it's very nice to have written all this, but how are you going to do it? So I said, well, I'm going to rehearse it. He said, you're going to rehearse the kissing scene? I said, yes, I'm going to rehearse the kissing scene. Because I wanted to make the actors feel not that they were kissing each other, but that they were actually technically doing something. I said, remember, you hear me? I said, remember the line that Hitchcock had said, where do the noses go? So please, let's have the noses go on either side. So, I had them tilt their faces this way, that way, etc., etc. And they actually did the kissing scene, though I remember Debussy Roy did wrinkle up her nose. And I had to make a cut and cut downstairs to Miss Stoneham. This is the kind of thing. But then after that, when I made Poruma, which Madhurima referred to in 1985, I suppose that was crossing the line because it was an elderly housewife who had at least one grown-up daughter, 3 children, and she had an adulterous affair with a man much younger than her. Now this is fairly commonplace, but at that time,
did you see that film?
I was in for a lot of flack because I remember. I'll just tell this anecdote so that you know what I'm talking about. During the premiere, there were a lot of. The upstairs balcony was taken over for the premiere, and the downstairs auditorium was, open to the public. And I went downstairs, directors are curious to see how the audience is reacting. So I went downstairs during the interval, and there were several young men who came up to me and said, what do you mean? What do you mean? Women's independence doesn't mean doing whatever you like? I said, no, it's okay. You just see the whole thing and then we'll talk about it later. So I went upstairs. And I was very frightened to go down again because actually I'm a bit of a scaredy cat. So, then People left the hall. 3 little old ladies came up to me. They looked, around to see if anyone was looking. And they came up to me and they whispered in my ear, "Bless you, my dear."
Gorkha, Ratna played a very challenging role, and the whole country knows about what happened with that film. Over to you, Ratna.
Hello, I'm happy to be here. It's odd that Aparna-ji was talking about such resistance when she was making these films about 20 years ago. And it's a pity that we are still in that same quagmire, fighting about the stupidest things possible, about cutting a line, a gesture, a sentence, a name, an alphabet. It's strange. So almost everything, because all you have to do is eat beef and you are a rebel. For Christ's sake, we've made it that easy for us, crossing lines. And of course, women and women's films and women's issues are the flavor of the month. They were the flavor of the month sometime when I was in college. Everyone was talking about these things. We didn't have the money to make movies, but we made plays and everyone wrote about this. And the woman was always at the center of this terrible plot to destroy her. My mother, who is also an actress, was an actress, she acted in the most god-awful Gujarati plays, where she was the put-upon Bahu or the put-upon mother-in-law forever. I remember going to film after film, play after play, where Ma was involved, and coming out with 20 tear-soaked handkerchiefs, and I didn't see the point of it. And I tell you, I bought that idea of me as a woman, of the victim, the one who needs to be protected, in spite of the fact that I grew up in a family of women who were great fighters, all of them. But when they worked, when my mother worked, the only alternative was Padmavati type of Mera Gurjari, the woman who's going to, but eventually she is the Sati version of woman, the Devi version of woman. No exploration of the woman as a person. But then I realized there's not much exploration of the man as a person either. So there's something maybe wrong with us. What we need out of this experience of consuming art, theatre, film, we want reinforcement of old ideas somehow. And I feel, this is my thesis and I'm completely unbacked, but I really feel that we've been brought up on a handful of stories. And we're just so happy with those handful of stories that we don't mind replicating them in different ways all the time. The tropes are so clear. It's only in the recent 40, 50 years that handful of stories has been shifted about a little bit. And in the last 5 to 10 years, that shift is becoming more visible to me. Which is why I feel a film like Lipstick could be made. Because there's a person who's willing to look at the issue not as a problem issue, but about 4 women and their needs and their desires and them as people. And they're unusual people, all 4 of them. Thank God. If we can just put aside the idea of the woman as the great sacrificer, everywhere you are sold this idea. And popular art is particularly guilty of that. Television. Oh, when I began television in '84, which seems like a lifetime ago, the first thing I did was Idhar Udhar. 2 girls and a boy, all unrelated to each other, sharing a flat. Can you imagine doing that today? How many people's morality would be shaken by this idea of 3 disconnected young people in a non-sexual relationship? None of them are supposed to be even gay, for Christ's sake. Then there was Tara, There was Mouthful of Sky, there was Udan. Look at television of that time. And the television posts ask who? How we completely wiped out everything new and replaced it with what we have seen for years and heard for generations. So this new battle that the people are fighting, I feel that the filmmakers of today are better equipped. They have stories which I think mean something to them personally. I think they're better script writers, a lot of them.
I never thought again about actively needing to cross a line, but what I saw, much like Ratna is saying, what I saw around me growing up on our screens, on our television, was not reflective of the extraordinary vitality and the actual extraordinariness of ordinary people. So my entrance to cinema or to expressing myself initially came from street theatre, but then quickly went into documentary film, and I was lucky enough to study documentary in the tradition of what they call cinema verité, the cinema of truth, where you chose a subject, like I chose a subject in Making India Cabaret, one of my early films in 1984, which was about what is the line that divides women from propriety and from respectability. And it was always, in some senses, their own use of sexuality, which was always, in many cases, to do with economics. And I chose to make a film, which is to say, to find women who had to or showed their bodies. In these cases, they were strippers, they were striptease dancers in a pretty seedy nightclub called Meghraj in Ghatkopar outside Bombay, where two women, Rekha and Rosie, who chose to let me come in and live with them in Antop Hill for 3-4 months before they could, so that they could know me and trust me before I could bring my camera into their lives. My parents, of course, were horrified and said I didn't exist for those 4 months. And everyone in Antop Hill, or as they called it, Antofi, thought I was a stripper, which was a very interesting place to be in, because I could then be observed and be treated like the women that I wanted to make a film about. Not so much about the women only, but also about the men who decidedly in a patriarchal society, who come often, regular customers who come often in a nightclub to see them take their clothes off. And because alcohol was often consumed in vast numbers, it became my best friend, and men were often drunk, and I could convince the men to let me go home with them and live with them and their extended families, their wife, their parents, and very, very traditional extended families, in this case in Bindi Bazaar. So it was like this eternal triangle Indian style, of the women, and I got very close to the man's wife, Mrs. Pujara, and I used to sit and make parathas with her for weeks on end, and I would listen to her dreams and I would record them eventually. And I would, of course, go all over the country with Rekha and Rosie and understand what they did. One wanted respectability and one didn't give a damn about it. She told a great story, Rekha, on the rooftop of Meghraj, with a cigarette in one hand and a beer bottle in another, in a full nylon sari. They would take their clothes off for the stripper dancing, but as soon as they would go into the green room, they would hide behind their saris to put on their clothes. It was completely modest and completely different. And she told me this fantastic story about she says, what will goodness bring us? Let me tell you the story of Yamaraj, she said. Yamaraj is the god of death. And she says, 3 लड़की गया ऊपर heaven में, एक लड़की यमराज पूछा क्या किया तुम नीचे? I don't know, I think everyone speaks Hindi. So I said, what did you do down below? So he said, मैंने कुछ नहीं किया. I looked at one man, I only married the same man, and that's what I did. So the Lord of Death said, give her the bronze keys and let her go. And she said, thank you. Then the second woman came and she said, तुमने क्या किया? मैंने एक शादी किया एक दूसरे के साथ. I loved one man, I married another man, and that's what I did. He said, give her the silver gates to heaven. And then she said, तब मैं आई, Rekha came, and she said, तुमने क्या किया नीचे? And of course she used double entendres the whole time. What did you do down there? And she said, I gave ecstasy to every man, and in the process I gave myself great ecstasy and pleasure, and I did not give a damn, and I just lived the life I want to live. Or Yamaraj, the Lord of Death heard this and said, give her the keys to my room. And she said, you know, what did those virtuous Sati Savitri ko kya mila? Dekho unko kya mila, dekho mujhe kya mila. And you know, and this is life. This is life. This is the extraordinary body, vitality, and real jaan of not just our people, but you know, our beating hearts. And this you would never get on screen, at least at that time. And I made this film, and which got more and more complicated because it involved this man and his wife. And when you heard her dreams, Mrs. Gujara, the respectable woman, you wondered really which woman is the more free and which woman is the most oppressed. And that is the point. But when I showed this film, which was in 1985 in the International Film Festival in Hyderabad, it was a documentary. Those days we didn't see documentaries. We saw documentaries on coal and documentaries to put you to sleep. But when we showed this film, it brought the house down. Firstly, it was full of men in the audience, 1,500 men, all expecting sex because it was called India Cabaret. And there was no sex. It was about, you know, this triangle. And it was a very eye-opening film for me to be in the audience because it was the first time I heard the language of the street, literally of Patwa, of Bambaiya on the screen. And it was very different than the filmy language than our films and our television at that time, you know, used to work with. And it gave me the courage that our truth and our extraordinary quality of who we are as people and our complicatedness, both men but especially women, was extraordinary. And it could be made into films that could be made for the population, and gave me the courage actually to use that patwa, to use that language, the Bombay English and Hindi all mixed up, into my first feature film, Salam Bombay, which was very much, again, I mean, crossing the line is a little sort of pretentious in retrospect because it was not about that at the time. It was about, again, the extraordinary, unsentimental desire to have a childhood of a street kid who was denied everything but a childhood, and who wanted to live, and who wanted to live with no self-pity, but who wanted to live with great, sometimes flamboyance and sometimes terrible pain.
You make your films when you portray the various characters, when you portray women characters and male characters.
First, Ratnaji just reminded me that it's very brave of me to be here among such strong women. So I'm already nervous. Yeah, but I think that we all have the men and women within us, and my woman is more stronger than than I think a man.
Good one.
So I think, yeah, the kind of films, you know, I have been making, my female characters have been more fascinating to me. To make a strong female character is more interesting to me because I have seen that in life, the women are more stronger than men. In the time of crisis in the family, like the mother or the sister, she comes out to be more stronger than men. Man starts crying on the shoulder of the female, but the female, they are more strong. And what I have been seeing this in cinema, you know, previously, the female characters have been, we have been using them as props, like just for dancing or you know, for romance or for sex. But they are more than that. To me, they were more than that, and that's why I made Saaskhoon Maaf, in which she kills her 7 husbands. And you know, on this subject over here, because now the actors like Konkana or Deepika, they also strongly hold that market where you can, you know, they are treated and by the audiences and by the industry as like the equal stars. And behind the camera, we see women more than men. There are line producers or the first ADs, they are more efficient than men. So besides the, you know, whatever is happening by the state to the cinema, I think we as an industry, we are coming more towards equality as far as cinema is concerned. And otherwise, when we are talking about cutting the nose, that is in our हमारे शास्त्र में भी जो है, तो then that was also wrong. When you know, Lakshmanji cut the nose of Subrana. She was just looking at, she was admiring it. What was the point of cutting her nose? And Bhagwan Ram threw the Sita out on the line of Dhobi. Was that justified? So this suppression has been going for a long time, for thousands of years.